We're almost ready to roll. Thank Good day. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, now we're kind of into our experiencer part of the program now. Let's just think about this whole thing for a second, okay? You're minding your own business, you're living your life, and all of a sudden some little gray dude is tapping you on the shoulder at night and messing with you. How in the heck do you deal with this? Okay? How do you deal with this? The fact is that there are many, many people out there that aren't able to deal with this because you just can't go to anybody else. Okay? You just can't go to your next door neighbor. You can't go to your family doctor. You can't go to your minister. Oh, they'll give you some help, of course. Here's some pills. Stay away from the demons. It's not really any help. So there are a group of people, special people in this world that know what's going on, and that take the time to give of themselves to help people through this reality. And one of the most special ones of all of them is going to talk to us now from her heart. And oh yes, please welcome Mary Rodwell.
Well, what a pleasure it is to be here and have a chance to share with such beautiful people that I've already met so many times before. This is my 4th time here, and every time I'm so overwhelmed and touched by the beautiful people that I meet here and who I learn from and have the opportunity to share with. Most of all, it's a great gift for me to meet Bob again and his beautiful family, who so kindly invite me to come and share this special time with you. So I want to honor you for coming and honor them for putting this a wonderful event on, because it touches so many lives. Me, I'm so lucky, you know. I'm able through my work to meet what I call the most aware people on the planet. How amazing is that? I really chose well this time. I really chose well. And by the way, whoever wants to think of me as Mary Roswell, you're more than welcome. Or the alien lady is another one. Gosh, that's cute. It's okay for me. Look, today I'm sort of taking up a notch. And I think it's time, and I think you're ready, to hear a little bit more of what I've discovered in 15 years with 1,600 cases. For me, it's been an incredible journey, just for me personally, to take me out of my nurse, midwife, counselor role and actually show me a greater reality that I have continually had to move with. The reality where I talk of it a bit like I'm standing on an ice floe, which at the moment is my reality. And every time I get new information, this ice floe melts, and I have to jump to another ice floe, which starts again. And I know that those of you who have experiences, that's exactly a similar kind of process. So you're taking me with you, whether you like it or not, because I have to go if I'm to understand a little bit more of joining the dots to what this is all about, and who we are, why we're here, and what are these intelligences ultimately wanting from us, or what are they saying to us, or what are we learning from them, what are they learning from us, what does it all mean? And so I'm going to try and touch on a little bit of all of that today. I want to provide you with an ice flow. I'm promising you it's going to melt because you're going to find out more after this. But what it will do is give you a baseline to stand from so that you can explore even more. So it's my ice flow, if you like. And I want you to understand, for me, the way to really get a sense of this is through the very people that have the experience. Because to me, what do you do? If someone's had a baby, you want to know about what's it like. You don't ask the nurse, you don't ask the doctor, you ask the person who's having the baby. So for me, I'm asking the person who's having the baby. And I'm asking them, what does it feel like? What are you learning? How do you understand this? What does it mean to you? So I'm going to start with something I call the star kids. Now, that's a very, very generic term. Some may call them indigos, crystal children, children of light, golden children. A lot of metaphysical groups are recognizing these children. Star kids, but also Dolores Cannon and Suzanne Hansen also talked about the third wave. There seems to be, to me, we're looking at this at a very narrow perspective 9 times out of 10, don't we? It's the abductee and the very classic abduction experience. I have to tell you, out of all my clients, that particular focus, which seems to grab our attention because we really do get off on fear a lot, don't we? That it grabs our attention, that there's only a small percentage of my clients that actually are in that place. And they're the ones that I was drawn to because my work as a counselor is about healing and honoring someone's experience and helping them understand what's going on. So I'm going to start with what I call the star kids. And to be honest, I think probably everyone in this room is related to this, to be truthful. But we're all in different waves of that. And as Dolores talked about, and as Suzanne Hansen also talks about, is there are waves of us opening up to this greater reality. Star kids, third wave, it doesn't really matter, does it? What it means to me is that we're all waking up on different levels to a greater reality. So let's start. And I'm using a quote here because I think it's very relevant. Sit down before fact like a little child and be prepared to give up every preconceived notion. Follow humbly wherever and whatever abyss nature leads, or you shall learn nothing. And that's been very, very relevant to me as a person. So I'm going to let you hear a story. Come on, Trace. Now I'm hoping this is loading. I'm waiting for it to load now. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it will. It's not at the moment. Come on, come on. This is great technology, isn't it? And I am absolutely useless at it, but I'm waiting for this little hand to come up, and it's decided not to. Oh, thank you.
My name is Tracy Taylor, and to share with you some of my experiences and some of the drawings that I have been doing that have come from my experiences with extraterrestrials. Since I was a very young child, about the age of 2 or 3, I remember having experiences with beings that were definitely not human, and most of those experiences have actually been very positive. It was quite normal for me as a child to have these experiences, and I thought that everyone else was having the same experiences until I grew up and became a teenager and realized that it was quite unusual, and I didn't find anyone else to be having these type of experiences and being taken up onto strange craft and flying around the place. It's been quite a journey, and through my teenage years it was very difficult to relate to other people of my age. I, at the age of 15, found that I had healing abilities, and this came from learning from my experiences with these ETs how to do this using my hands, and that was very natural to me. My family, though, really didn't have much of an idea about this sort of thing, and even though they've been very, very supportive through this, of course they really didn't know how to take my idea of being able to heal with my hands. Through up until about the age of 17, I had these abilities and psychic abilities, which I did end up repressing quite a bit because I thought I was going crazy. And I went to seek professional help. I went to psychologists and psychiatrists and had head scans and CAT scans, ECGs done, and obviously nothing was found. But more recently, over the past 3 years, I've been finding myself doing geometric type drawings that seem to come to me through these experiences, and I find I have this urge to draw, and I sit down and my hand seems to just take over, and when I try to have conscious input into what I'm doing, it doesn't seem to work. My hand stops, so I usually need to be sidetracked by watching TV or talking to someone, or being on the phone, and these geometric designs come through. I did a series of about 8 black and white ones, which after I completed them, I was told during a dream to put them onto transparency paper and that they'd fit together. And I thought, okay, well, I'll go and do that. And I actually met Mary Rodwell, which was a lifesaver, and went to a support group meeting with some other experiences, and they all sat down and put them together in a way that I hadn't tried before. I'll be showing you these and show you how they fit together. I'll now walk you through the drawings and explain to you some of the symbology and some of the...
I just wanted you to see a little bit of how Tracy Taylor, a young lady that I've been in contact with and who I've worked with for the last 10 years or so, taking it to what I call another level of experience, where things change for them in some really rather extraordinary ways. And I'm going to go into some of that during my presentation and how it fits in to what I call the big picture in terms of why we're interacting with these advanced intelligences. This is something Tracy said. There's a race of beings upon the planet increasing in number, although visually and physically indistinguishable. To most humans, they are the bringers of the new, the bringers of light. They're here to guide the awakening of terrestrial consciousness. And this is what I'm talking about. These new children coming in, and you're all part of that. And these new ones particularly that are a lot more aware of their purpose on this planet, whereas many of you perhaps know you've got something to do, but at the moment are not really quite sure what it is. The DNA of the new human has tenfold the amount of information, Tracy says. Telepathy, manipulation of time and space, non-verbal communication are all conscious abilities and are natural. So let's just have an overview here. Yes, this is global. Everywhere in the world, the more and more stories I'm hearing that these children are literally everywhere, all race and creed. Interestingly, this was something that I found was actually in the India Daily in 2005. In the region of Aksai Chin in the Himalayas, people are reporting strange behaviors in their children who are using sign language, which is unknown to their families. Many of these children also draw pictures of triangular objects flying in the sky, and these children regularly communicate with the extraterrestrials, who are only visible to the children and communicate via telepathy. Mexico. Again, Mexican children also manifest similar behavior, when many in the area reported long-time UFO sightings. The young children are very extra agile and very talented. They continually use strange sign language among themselves. However, it's said they cannot teach this language to adults. The locals in the area say UFOs have been visiting the area for thousands of years. And there's 1,000 children already identified that can see with various parts of their bodies. And I actually saw a video of a young woman in about 16 or 17, blindfolded. They put a newspaper under her feet, under her shoes, and she proceeded to read the headlines of the newspaper. also China. China has a program for investigating children with similar abilities, which is taken very seriously by the Chinese government in Beijing. The book China's Super Psychics by Paul Dong and Thomas Raphael describes children with exceptional human functioning who display similar patterns to the indigo or star children. They're very psychic and intuitive. For example, have abilities to open a flower with thought alone. They display telekinetic abilities as well as other fascinating multidimensional skills, such as sensing others' thoughts. And with telekinetic abilities, they're actually being able to move one object from one place to another with their mind. What is interesting is that the government has basically also observed these children changing human DNA in a Petri dish, and this has been before cameras and scientific equipment to record this supposedly impossible feat. Okay, so is this all part of the same phenomena? Well, from my research, it certainly suggests this. What I'm finding is that many of these children, particularly those that are able to vocalize to their parents without being shut down, and that's an important one. Children with memories of being on board spacecraft and being educated, like the little boy who I'll mention to you that said to his mum, "I don't mind going through the walls, and they teach me more on the ships than I learn at school." They have past life memories, including ones where they're not human. The information they have not consciously learnt, downloaded knowledge bombs, one little 8-year-old said that she had, and it sometimes made her head hurt. They have a sense of mission and purpose. They feel alienated more from the human and the humans than they do from their extraterrestrial cosmic family. They feel Earth is very primitive. They're usually very intelligent and intuitively created. There's a number of metaphysicians and other credible, more conventional individuals in terms of academia that are actually seeing this in a really interesting range of terms. Thomas Hartman, a former psychotherapist, speaks of the Edison gene, the gift of the hunter child, he calls it, and he believes such things as ADHD is the hunter's gene, a mutation of our genetic code that occurred 40,000 years ago and literally saved mankind from extinction, and is now back in the form of ADHD, a 600% increase in 1990. Research is showing a quantum leap in our evolution, and we are drugging the very people the world needs. And I'm going to go into the ADHD so-called syndrome, also autism and Asperger's syndrome, and looking at it from a completely different perspective to before. Dr. Atwater, here, this is something that she's noticed. And she's saying there's an extreme jump in intelligence between 24 to 26 points and concerns non-verbal intelligence. And this is the very important thing I want to stress, is this is what we call our intuitive right brain abilities. The ability to know and intuit information. And in the area of genius, once ranked scored between 134 and 136, a preponderance of today's youth test to 150, 160, many over 184. No precedent explains this. So this is really, really interesting. Edgar Cayce, of course, many of you will be familiar with. He also predicted something called the fifth root race. And it's really, really interesting, isn't it, that we are getting information and confirmation from so many different sources, which for me has been extremely important. Dr. Roger Leir, many of you here will be familiar with. And apart from his pioneering work in actually showing the reality of many of the implants that some of you feel you have and know that you have, and that's very important within our scientific community to actually show that this is a reality. Another area that he has also focused on is what we call the star children. And he looked back, and you've probably seen his statistics with this, and I've got one of these thanks to his kindness, where it's actually showing how we have progressed. And this was just within 40 years when firstly records of developmental stages came to be done in the 1940s. And what we're seeing here, and you can see on the screen yourself, accelerations in things like age of walking, an acceleration of 61.11% from 1947 to 1987. Saying simple words, 83.33% acceleration. We've got repeat simple sentences, 66.67. Is this, evolution? Or is there something else going on? And this is what I would like to look at. Okay, let's ask the experiencer once again what they know of this. Many of the children born these days have memories intact from their previous existence on board craft as extraterrestrials. They're kept on track by continuing their interaction with their cosmic family while in human form. And I know there's a number of people here that feel more related to their cosmic family than they've ever done to their human family. They say to me, I don't like it down here, Mary. I don't belong. I feel the human species is really quite strange. And they're very, very barbaric. My body feels too dense. I can't cope with it. I know, I've chosen to come here. And part of them is, I really wish now I could go home. So what is this? What is this aspect of experiencing a contact that is so different from what we have termed the abductee and the fear and the trauma and the huge trauma that they experience? And I would like to look at that as well as we go along. But a lot of the children, until they start to fear, will be quite accepting of their experiences. But this is what we've got. I don't mind going through the walls, and I learn more on the ships than I do at school. And this is another young child, 5 years old. They only come at night, float, not walk, and become invisible. There are blue ones too, like the ones I've seen in my mind's eye. And when you hear this from children, they don't watch talk shows. They'll see funny little aliens on telly maybe, in a cartoon. But some of the ways they describe their experiences is not on telly. And this is a really interesting one from a 2-year-old girl. Her mother went into her bedroom one morning, and this drawing was on the bed. And it was really quite fascinating because she said this. Mummy, I had a visitor in my room last night. A lady came down and she had no hair and no clothes on, but big eyes. And she took me to the window and up into a room. And she gave me something to eat. The picture you see is Jenna as she describes the lady. But the mother said, where did this drawing come from? Because her daughter only did scribble drawings. 2 years old, any mums here? You know what your son or daughter can do at 2. What son or daughter can draw that? And when she asked her, well, who is this? That was the lady that came last night. Sometimes I get a headache. My head's so small. I can't always take it in so quickly. It's like knowledge bombs are being dropped on my head. They're like giant Teletubbies. They sit cross-legged and they meditate. They take the baby too and feed her. Now this is an interesting story because the little girl that mentioned this was 5 years old and her baby sister was only 2 years old. And the mother was really quite concerned because the little baby just didn't want to eat anything. And her daughter said, well, no, because she was fed something actually on the spaceship. This is a 4-year-old drawing. The mother came up to me and gave this to me. And she said she really didn't know what to make of it. There you're seeing quite clearly the being which has 2 big eyes, but no mouth, no nose, no hair. And this is what I mean. These children do not see it like this on the television. So it becomes really, really very tangible. Another 4-year-old's drawing, a triangular ship, very, very clear. And there's even one underneath. This is a really fascinating and complex drawing for a 4-year-old child. And what was really interesting was he'd done an energy field around it. And he said that's stopping the people from going in and out, is how he understood it. What child draws an energy field around a spacecraft at 4? This is a little anecdote for you. I mean, you're familiar here, I'm sure, with the book from Whitley Strieber, Communion. It was this particular book that a mother said to me, her daughter, only 18 months old, went to the bookshelf. And with all the books there, this was the one book that she actually picked out, pointed to the being on the front and said, "Mummy, that's Clowny. He comes and gets me." Now, for all of you that don't know, clowns, Santa Claus, owls with big eyes are often a screen memory for an ET encounter. And as much as I understand, it's like part of the reason for that is that it's a form that they believe children will be comfortable with, rather than seeing a form that is frightening. But on some level, I think the child intuits it's not really Santa Claus, it's not really a clown. And unfortunately, it leaves them with a very great, deep fear of clowns or Santa Claus or owls with big eyes, which they don't understand. This is another drawing by Bianca when she was 6, and she's described her Clowny with his energy field and the craft that takes her up to the spacecraft, and she even pointed out the far window is where she looks out. And she says this, "Clowny sometimes takes me in his spacecraft. The colors are gray and black. I get there because Clowny flies, not with wings. He floats." This is not so good, and I apologize for the color of the paper, but there's Clowny with his energy field again. And again, at 6, Bianca says, "This is Clowny's energy field. Clowny used to scare me, but Mum and Dad said he's my friend. I thought, well, Clowny was stealing me, but he was healing me. Clowny said he'll protect everyone in my family, and Clowny's colors are white, yellow, red, pink, and blue. Clowny's like a friend to me and takes me away at night sometimes, but not very often anymore. He used to take me a lot when I was little, but I think it's because I've seen everything up there already." This is her brother. And this little lad Jesse, very, very interesting. He's drawn Clowny too because he sees Clowny. He also, his mother tells me, sees angels and talks to angels. But look at the fuzzy little legs, which to him were, Clowny floats. And three digits. And there's the spacecraft. So yes, it's intergenerational, and yes, it runs in families, which most of you here already know. This book, Transformation, that Whitley wrote, was also part of the family story, because at 5, Jesse used to insist on taking this book to bed with him. Now this is where it gets interesting. And what he used to do was scan the pages with his hand. But he insisted every other night his sister took it to bed with her. I don't know if she did the scanning, but certainly Jesse did. What rather freaked the mother out, despite the fact that's pretty unusual, is that one morning they both came down with a copy of this book. Now, all the time, the way I get a lot of my answers is, okay, if we go back to the analogy of I've not had a baby yet, let me ask the woman who's had the baby. But I actually asked a young man in England about this, who's also a star kid. And he said this, "Oh, it's easily explained." I thought, great. "The child reading the book with his hand is scanning the pages with his palm. The palm of the hand is a strong energy channel known as a minor chakra. So by scanning that way, the child was reading the energy signature, not the words. He could pick up the essence of the story through the author's emotions and moods at the time of creating the words. He could still enjoy, to some extent, and understand the story in this way, but through an emotional journey rather than allowing the words to stimulate the imagination as most mortals do." Notice the term mortals. As far as reproducing the same book, easy. We can manipulate time, as time in a linear sense just doesn't exist. It's a human invention to separate events and to make sure you conform to what is expected in your lives. All the child did was go backwards, through time if you like, and bring the same book back to the present with him. So the sister had the same book literally. Well, I don't know about you, but for me, if a 17-year-old told me that, I would be astounded. Well, it was a 17-year-old boy. So there you go. Whatever you make of that is entirely up to you. Again, different kinds of beings. This one with a very flat head, smaller eyes, drawn by a 10-year-old girl with a glowing torch, as she said as she came into the room. Very, very frightening for her. But again, we've got others with, this is a 13-year-old girl talking about beings with flat heads. So as Suzanne Hansen told you this morning, there's many, many forms of these beings. We're very keen on lumping people together, aren't we? And saying they're this or they're that. But actually, there are many forms of what we term greys, or those kinds of beings. 11-year-old. These were an 11-year-old and 13-year-old. I got contacted by a lady in Vancouver who told me her sons both had an experience one night and came to tell her about it the next morning. They both drew what they had experienced. And this is a really interesting one in the sense that both boys were very keen to articulate what had happened. This is the 11-year-old drawing. And what he's saying here is this. I'm going a bit ahead of myself here, so oh, that's right. Okay. What the 11-year-old said was in detail. This lady that you're seeing above what looks like an auditorium on the left there, there were a lot of children in pajamas, and it was like they were in an auditorium being taught something. This lady, he said, had no ears, no eyebrows, the nose was just slits, no fingernails, her face had no expression, but she was actually she was teaching them. And you can see him down there saying where exactly he was standing with all these other children, which I think was really fascinating. But what was also fascinating was this. The brother drew this being, which had a long stick-like thing. And what he said was, he felt the being was curious, a scientist, curious about us. And he told us that it was something to do with genetics. And when he asked about the stick thing, he said it wasn't to harm us, it was actually to calm us down. So they had quite an understanding of what was going on, but the interesting thing that I particularly remember was this. They both felt quite uncomfortable remembering the details, but he remembered the light coming in their bedroom, and the older brother remembered the younger brother that they both left at the same time, but the younger brother was crying. And what he said was, if I have to go to the spaceship, then I'm bringing my teddy. And the older brother said he had to rush around finding it because they knew they didn't have much time. And it's those little details that give this such a tangibility, from an imagination to a real event. And she says they're often seeing craft in the sky, and this is one of the orbs that she said was over her son when she took a picture at a birthday party. So it seems like often they're followed around by these orbs, and I'm going to mention a little bit about that later on as well, the phenomena that go with this that intrigue us. And that's one of the craft. I know it looks like a small dot, but actually when you look at it close, it's what we've seen so many times before. Again, let's go back to what Tracy is telling us. And to me, it's very profound. As the collective resonance of today's civilization peaks, there will be a collapse of that which was once programmed into the collective. This will bring about a global awakening. It is happening already, and the children who are born without programs and have come directly, in essence, from other star systems, which it ties in very well with what Dolores is finding out, and are from various places, the spectrum of life's vibrating realities. So let's look at the new cosmic human, the new human, Homo Noeticus, part of where and what we are. So let's look at some of the characteristics. They're highly intelligent. They perceive other realities. They see unusual beings, and often strange orbs of light, balls of light are very, very common. There is a deep sense of mission, and often a sadness that somehow they can't access it. They have often healing abilities, and they have the urge to write strange languages, or speak strange languages, should I say, and write unusual symbols or drawings, or complex geometric drawings. Dr. Boylan also has isolated and understood this phenomena and does sterling work in supporting the star children. And this is also what he says and what I also subscribe to in terms of what they are about. First, that they often complain that their human body feels too dense, apart from wanting to speak or write in strange languages or draw unusual symbols. They can feel and sense other people's thoughts. I remember a 13-year-old girl telling me, you know, when my teacher speaks to me, it's really difficult, she said, because she'll be saying something, but what I'm seeing in her mind is completely different. And she said, and what's in her mind sometimes isn't very nice. So I'm warning you guys, keep it pure. Keep it pure. An interesting one from Russia, and some of you may be aware of this with Project Camelot, interviewing a young man called Boriska. Boriska, when he was 7 years old, but often, it was before that age, remembered his past lives. One of them he remembered actually when he was a Martian and came to Earth at the time of Lemuria. He spoke about the gifted kids, which he called indigos, and he was also prophesying Earth changes. Very, very interesting in the sense that he had profound cosmic knowledge and was capable of narrating the entire history of Lemuria and the Lemurians. And he said, you know, it ceased to exist 800,000 years ago. They were 9 meters tall. So he's going into detail. These people had found, we'll find knowledge under the pyramids, not the pyramid of Cheops. It has not been discovered yet. Life will change once the Sphinx is opened, he said, and the opening mechanism is behind its ear. Well, that sounds really all very interesting, but, well, what corroboration are we of that? I heard from a lady in Australia with her 5-year-old son when he tried to speak about, she was telling him about the pyramids and, you know, all these slaves building them and the traditional view, and he said, no, he got really, really cross with her. I said, no, I was there. He said, no, they levitated the stones. They changed the density structure of solid objects and levitated them into place. And there was a giant crystal they placed on the top to communicate with other worlds. This is a 5-year-old little boy talking about changing the density structure of objects we're talking about here. I struggle to say that, let alone, you know, a 5-year-old. And then I get a lady in her 70s in Adelaide telling me finally of an encounter she had when she was 51. And from that, she was a farm girl, went outside, saw this structure, thought the Shire had put something there overnight, not realizing as she stood underneath it that it was a spacecraft, because she'd never seen one. Ended up being on a spacecraft, blonde-haired beings with blue eyes, and telling her the real origin of our species. And she said, do you know about the pyramids, Mary? And I said, tell me. She said, you know, it wasn't who they said it was at all. They were levitated into place. And she said there was a giant crystal that was placed on the top. I thought, you know, I've heard this before somewhere. You start to say, well, hold on a minute here. This is a 76-year-old woman who had never spoken of her experiences before. Okay, Dolores, and I think I've spelt her name wrong, or at least I'm apologizing that I've just realized that now. Dolores has become a really dear friend, and what was so wonderful for me and my support group was when Dolores came to Perth, she always came and spoke to my group as well. But what I loved about her work was that we work in many similar ways. And some of the information that I've discovered through my many regressions with clients, I'm getting confirmed with Dolores and her work. And one of the most fascinating was where she was showing a recording in regression of a language. And I'm sure Dolores will remember it. When this recording came with the language, one of my clients burst into tears and got terribly emotional. And she said, I know that language, I know it. And afterwards, you know, we talked about that. And that's what I found with many of the languages, that people in other parts of the world actually can relate to them or understand them, not always in a linear way that we speak, but on a deep resonance and have a real sense of them. And I'll go into that a little bit more soon. So let's look at The Secret School. Whitley Strieber wrote a book about it. I think at the time he was given a hard time about it as well. But so many stories of going missing as a child and finding the parents really cross. And I think Mike this morning talked about that, going missing and his mother saying, "Where have you been? What have you been up to?" And I've been outside, I've been playing. I attended school at night. I had friends that walked through walls and became invisible. We spoke telepathically, and I desperately wanted to go home. Interestingly, a gentleman told me his 18-month-old daughter said one night to him, "Daddy, I want to go to bed." And he said, "But why?" "Because I want to go home." What a strange thing for a young 18-month little child to say, unless you have a little bit more understanding of this. An adult star kid. Remembering what I did before is like remembering a dream. It does not mean it's not real. It means that the mechanical thought processes lie outside my now normal conscious thinking. It lies on the outer ridges of the mind. You just have to find the edges and go further. This gentleman told me, he's now in his 30s, that he used to be able to open the bud of a flower with his mind. Back to the China super psychics. Hi. Same thing. Turning lights on and off with his mind. Affecting traffic lights. How many of you have found that happening? Also affecting computers and things, and it can be very expensive. I won't go into that as well. Other things that he said, which was interesting, is I could take boiled eggs out of hot water without hurting my fingers. And I found that really interesting. I had a 64-year-old lady come up to me when I gave a short presentation once in Perth, and she said, "You know, when you mentioned that, Mary, I used to be able to do that." And then I would hear someone else say the same. One gentleman in his 30s said to me, "You know, Mary, that I used to play with cars in my room, and I could levitate them. But it never happened when I had my mates around, but I could never work out why they couldn't do it too." There you go. I could turn out street lights. And this is a really fascinating one. I would have telepathic conversations with my sister until she told me to stop being lazy and start talking. Isn't it incredible? I just find this so interesting. So there you go. And this is not unusual. I met a beautiful lady who had a 5-year-old son, and she said, "The thing that freaks me out the most, Mary, is I'll be thinking, oh, I think I'll give Aidan beans on toast for lunch." And before she said a word, he'll say, "Yeah, beans on toast will be great, Mum." And it really freaked her. Well, it freaked most of us, wouldn't it? But the evidence of that, it's so common, it's no longer a surprise to me. So the traits, some of the traits, and I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can because there's a lot I want to go through. So they seem to have, and this is what Tracy understands of the star kids, superior mental and analytical capabilities, direct connection to higher awareness, extreme sensitivity to thought and emotion, enhanced DNA, which I'll go into, photographic memories, fast motor neuron responses. They are able to manipulate time and space. Think of those two children I talked about manifesting another book. Very interesting. A non-verbal communication. These are just some of the abilities that they seem to manifest. Okay, now, one of the things that I would like to go into here is this. In no way at any point am I trying to avoid or not honor those that are having a really tough time with this. Because I can't even imagine myself what it must be like when you're at your most vulnerable to have something appear in your room. I do remember as a little kid, you know, someone's waking up and thinking somebody might be there and getting the covers very slowly and hoping they don't see it and pulling them over my face and thinking if I don't move, they won't get me. I have no idea whether or not I just had a bad dream or whether something else was going on, but I remember being very, very scared. And that's nothing compared to what some individuals experience. But this is what Tracy actually said about how she got to understand her more scary experiences to start with. And this is, yeah, let's just go into this. What she understands is that it's time for human beings to remember themselves with conscious awareness and with complete understanding of their innate connection to the universe. And this is the primary role of the new children. But what she's actually saying here, and I'm going a bit ahead of myself here, is this. As far as my own contact, I became very compassionate towards ET beings, as there is so much that humans can learn and benefit from interacting with them. I was fearful of my experiences only when I realized that I seemed to be the only one having them. I didn't know what was going on or why, but there's always been an equal exchange. I helped them achieve their genetic goals, and in return, my healing and psychic ability, plus my understanding of life on Earth and so on, has been enhanced. They also protect me when I ask them to. Basically, at the start, I misunderstood the Greys. The knowing ET part of me initially made a decision to assist them, and the understanding of this can be overshadowed by fear, which stems from our limited human perceptions and reactions to these experiences. And that's how she actually understood it. And what I will say to you is that often, you know, what I've discovered with working with experiences is when they come to me, often the fear stems more from the unknown rather than the known. And once they go into a place where they can explore the experience, often what they feared isn't actually true to what they experienced. And part of the way that I work, and Dolores will understand this, and those that work in the same field as me, like Barbara Lamb, for example, know that there's a part of you that actually does understand. There's a part of you has that knowing. And if you can access that, you can start accessing your own answers. And what I do in regression is exactly that. I get them to talk to that part of them that knows, or to even talk to the beings themselves. And actually, as you heard this morning from Peter O'Brien saying, he asked them, what are you doing? Because you're terrifying me. And they said, we're healing you. That was not what he expected to hear. He was told these were demons. What he found out was that actually, for many, it's a medical procedure that's checking them out, just like you go to the doctor. There's often healing procedures, and there's many, many stories I could tell you of healing that's happened aboard craft. And one lady even had her teeth sorted out, and I'll tell you that she went to the dentist. She knew she had 4 amalgam fillings, and the dentist said, well, there's nothing wrong with your teeth. And she said, well, what about the ones that have fillings? He said, what fillings? She, 4 amalgam fillings. I had them, a few years ago. He said, there's nothing wrong with your teeth. And she firmly believes that the amalgam fillings were taken out because of her work and what she needed to do. She needed to be a clearer, more purified conduit for the information that was coming through her. And the mercury and whatever else is in amalgam was obviously getting in the way. But there's been healings from terminal illnesses right through to more simpler conditions. So, okay, so why are they healing some of us? And why does some of them actually save us from, so many have told me I could have drowned, but some unseen hand saved me. The times that I've heard this. So why are they doing all of this if actually their intentions are not positive? Let's see if we can find out more about that. Okay, let's go to the secret school. Sometimes I get a headache because my head's so small, and she has knowledge bombs in her head. Let's take that one step further. Now, God willing and a fair wind, this is going to work. Oh, no. Back again, please. There's the thing. This is a gentleman that I'm doing the commentary for. He's an artist who's had experiences. And he's describing a time where he went to the secret school in London, where he went missing. And hopefully, it's going to start.
In the East End of London. I remember it was in daylight hours after school finished, in the long summer evenings and weekends. I would get this impulse to play with special friends and go to a special spot at the back of the school. I went back to this spot later and knew exactly where it was, and when I saw it again it was uncanny. It was obviously something about this spot. When I went there were other children, but not those I went to school with. I have missing time from that period. for whatever happened was screened out. We'd all meet at this spot and go off somewhere. There was no fear, but an incredible sense of adventure. And then I'd find myself back at home. I can remember Mum wondering where I was and becoming quite concerned. I'd basically gone missing. But I had no sense of anxiety at all. It was like, "What's the problem, Mum? I'm here." As I got older, in my 7th or 8th year, I had clear memories of silhouette beings coming into my room at night. Even the shape of the being's head, it's weird. And when the film E.T. came out, it was like, oh my God, I've seen that shaped head before. It was bizarre. Dwarf-like creatures, small silhouettes, and there was no fear. But having said that, as a child, I could never sleep with the light off, and definitely being afraid of passageways and elevators terrified me. And that was the same for Father Christmas. He terrified me. If we were in Oxford Street in London at Christmas time, Father Christmas was everywhere, and it was so embarrassing. I would know when they were coming. I'd be laying down in bed and basically see little heads playfully pop up to play games with my feet. I used to lay my feet flat, and they would duck under the bed, and this was all the while my parents were in the kitchen having a cup of cocoa. The closest they'd get to me is halfway along the bed, and I would be out of it and fall asleep. Or maybe they knocked me out.
That's one experience of what I call the secret school. Whitley Strieber talks about it in his book, The Secret School. So what's actually going on here? And this is where I'm going to. An educational program for planet Earth. And we're all part of it and we're all in it. But some have some extra special lessons. And I'm going to go into some of what I call the programs of that. What Whitley Strieber says is it was like remembering a journey outside of time. It was another step he was taught. He had 9 lessons involved in the manipulation of time because learning how to use time as a tool is the key to reaching higher consciousness and a real relationship with the beings. So that's Whitley's account. For me, one of the most amazing and wonderful gifts of the work that I do is that I am privileged to get information from all sorts of different people with their own personal experiences with this. And I have then the opportunity to put patterns together and to get a greater understanding, which for me has been an incredible journey. So this is what I try and do. I try and put bits together. Let's go to the next one of these. And this is a young man. I'm just trying to find where I am. I always go ahead of myself, so you'll have to bear with me. Okay. Let's see this. This is a young man who talked about his experiences as a child learning physics. And this is what he said to me in his email. Your website has become a revelation to me. I'd never heard of or read of anyone who'd had alien classes as a child, as I have. This has been both a blessing and a curse in my life. I am now 37. I remember having been given physics classes at the age of 3 and 4 in a classroom of children of similar age to me. I remember the details well and have an avid interest in physics since then, although I'm not mathematically inclined, so have not known what to do with the information. And there's a lot of it. I used to feel I was just crazy and did a year of philosophy, science, and amazed myself and my teacher and other students, many engineers and physicists, with the fact I could just answer any question. I had never studied and, in fact, dropped out of school as I was so frustrated. Okay, education in advanced mathematics. This lady I met in Western Australia has a BA in comparative philosophy and social anthropology and a graduate diploma in education. She's currently undertaking a master's in educational studies. This is her and her beautiful cat, and some of the information she told me she was given by the light beings or the light people, and how I was taught multidimensional, non-linear methods of thinking. This is possible, human to human, and does happen, but of course the light people have far more expansive knowledge bank and I have quite a deal of interest in it by people in the field of consciousness and learning who I've sent it to. Because of her own background, she knew who to resource. This is one of the sheets. The two progressive sheets were done quite consciously with great flashes of insight. There were about 10 or so dreams during that period which directly overcame any problems that I had when I could not solve awake. Most of the dreams entailed visual representation. One in particular, I was led by a light person who took me to a black hole to observe, with commentary, thought transfer from a light entity, the separation and potential restructuring of space-time instantly, finest viscosity of time, in a constant smashing of the same due to infinite gravity, and how the potentiality of new universes exist in the core of a black hole. Some more of these on an A2 format. What she found out when she sent this to Professor Brian Jefferson, Chair of Physics at Cambridge University, which showing Planck's constant. This is maths we will not see for hundreds of years due to the a-dimensional nature of the spin and lack of fixed parameters. String theory has come a long way since then. This work is not unrelated. Right, she actually got a similar thing from another gentleman who was chair of physics at Adelaide University, mathematics of the future. And she said, the light people paraphrased, the configuration is describing the black hole force in any particle mass. It is therefore the inherent potential in the creation, destruction in space. And she mentioned some other technical mathematical stuff that I'm not even going to try and relate to you now, just in case I say it in the wrong way. But what she was basically saying is this. The viscosity of time is not understood in science. The term is not used. This notion is crucial to the formula. That is, viscosity of time is dense around the event horizon of a black hole. And so this is the type of incredibly detailed information that Chris, who has done standard mathematics, doesn't even understand. And again, she was shown, she was able to show this to Professor Paul Davis, who was in the chair of physics at Adelaide University. So I thought, okay, experiences tell me that they are often taught physics. Let me see what Tracy would make of this. So I sent her one of the sheets, and she happened to be in London at the time. I said, Trace, can you give me some thoughts on what you reckon all of this is? And all she saw was the formulas, okay? And this is what she said. I looked at Chris's drawings briefly, but it seems that they are related to the understandings of beyond light travel, and also the connections between the inner world, macrocosm, and microcosm, and how they are interrelated. So I thought that was really quite amazing after 24 hours of going over to the Northern Hemisphere and back. So I said to Chris, what do you think of what Tracy has said? And she said, she's absolutely spot on. Over 5 to 6 weeks I was taught about the viscosity of time-space continuums in my dreams. It is how the inner and outer connect and how we can dematerialize within overlapping continuums. Yes, it's beyond light travel. Good God, some of the best physicists in the world have looked at this and haven't realized what she's seen at a glance. So, boy, that's pretty powerful, isn't it? Okay, so what is the syllabus? And I'm sure I am only touching a very microcosm of what is actually taught on the craft. So we'll go into some of the subjects. Quantum physics, multidimensional healing, new understandings of the experiences of time, the connection of all things, new thought processes, understanding the spatial geometry of thought, new expanded states of consciousness, out-of-body training, telekinesis, telepathy, mind meld, ecology, healing and working with energy, the true history of man's origins, time travel and teleportation are just some of the subjects. Some of those look really interesting, don't they? I wouldn't mind doing some of those, but one other one I'd like to add, and this is because I did some work with Suzanne Hansen, and she told me a story, and I feel really impelled to tell you, although I've got to be really quick. One of the experiences on the craft where she mentioned to me, she was taken with her son going in one direction, she went in another. And it was a parenting class for star kids. And she went in the class and she saw an experience which looked like she'd been videotaped when it happened, in the experience with an interaction with her son. And she described to me seeing it, in fact, quite embarrassingly, with another group of parents, and how she'd interacted with him. And then they proceeded to show her how her son interpreted it. And that was very disturbing, because he didn't interpret it the way she'd hoped he would. And they said they taught her a new way of interpreting how to actually interact with her son, so he got the message in the way that she wished. And she got very teary, because she said that explains why she always found herself behaving differently with one child in respect to the other, and was very profound for her, and I hope she doesn't mind me just mentioning this to you. So, okay, parenting training as well. Hypercommunication, Dr. Boylan talks about this, and of course I concur. It should be borne in mind that the nature of extraterrestrial communications is in a majority of instances, star visitors communicate with humans by telepathic transfer of mental images and concepts rather than by words and speech. Hypercommunication, as Tracy Taylor talks about it, is everything is made up of the same matter resonating at different harmonics. So the ETs are able to communicate with us, directing thought on subatomic levels, and so activates subconscious. These symbols are meant to communicate the nature of the macrocosm. Language. Dana Redfield, who sadly now has passed away, a few years ago I communicated with her. She wrote the book Summoned and the Human ET Link. She said to me when she saw one of my DVDs with Tracy speaking the languages, when Tracy began to speak in the musical language, I spoke along with her, almost as if we were engaging in a two-way conversation. So this is global. This means that some of us have an ability to understand and translate this kind of thing. These are scripts now that you're going to see, and I was hoping some of the language would actually be heard, but I'm not sure if we can start it off. Thank you.
Shanti asena erhano, Klanti afele koma, entame asena chroma, Telia fonti asen.
Nico forget school like a dian go to Barketia. Mugo hurricane no cork, cigarette, get up gold oatka, a cool lagma. Signia, the carrier, snickery, is gay, et correct. Magar leginico.
Another of the many, many drawings that I get sent. Some of them are actually quite incredibly complex. And unfortunately, today I can't go into showing some of those, just a brief idea of some of the complex ones and the process that goes behind them. For some of you that are interested, come and see me, because I do have DVDs with some of this on. This particular one is just to show you the difference of the kinds of drawings that you get. This one was actually 1.5 meters by 0.5 meter in its size, and this lady would get up in the middle of the night knowing she had something to put down on paper. And these amazing drawings would be done by this lady. She said she felt an enormous, wonderful feeling inside her and totally impelled to put these down onto paper. And I would like, if I get a chance, to tell you a little bit more about that. Before we go any further, I would just like to explain something that both I heard from Chris Hale and how she understood the mind melds. And it's directly as part of this. Tracy says about this, languages. The language is a more accurate representation of an individual soul vibration. It means that the language comes directly from the essence of the universal mind, God or source, which ultimately links all of existence together. The spoken sounds of a particular language tend to bypass much of the linear, logical aspects of consciousness. Therefore, there's no input from the conscious mind. The language has no structure and is therefore not related to the past in any way. Therefore, in its purest form, it becomes vocal when it bypasses linear space-time. The language is a creation of the soul in a way that directly connects with the soul of another unconsciously. There's no framework, as the interpretation of the sound vibration is instantaneous and cannot be accurately interpreted into English or any other language spoken at this time. It is teaching us to communicate with our soul and the soul of others. This is one of the steps to telepathic communication.
These languages, blocks of information comes through, and to translate it into our tongue would take quite some time. Often you would need to fill a whole house with encyclopedias to actually translate a message that may be relayed in this tongue in a few seconds. A sample that is close in vibration to ours is this one. Iomeratus embrakithendra, wali aven ojindra. This means that we are reaching a stage in our evolution where chance is no longer as we imagine it. Everything has a place, and we are now drawing all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together. And we are recognizing our part.
Universal language. The symbols and scripts are ancient forms of communicating with volumes of information without having to read pages and pages. How many of you are studying would love to know what's in that book just by literally just allowing a download? Gosh, I could do with that for sure. I don't know about you. What a wonderful way to learn. So this seems to be the concept and what we're going to be going into in terms of our understanding. From verbal communication to telepathy. And we are being prepared for that, and some of us already have the software for that. And I believe we all have the potential for that as well. Let's go into it in a little bit more depth. When I asked Chris Hale about the way she understood this kind of telepathy, she called mind melds. And she sort of said this. She said that kids who have experiences in a different way of learning than our generally accepted linear way. Now this ties into ADHD, for example, and others where they find difficulty in concentrating, for example. She said this. In lectures, when the lecturer is in full flight of teaching and his or her mind is completely open to the students, I found I could just go into their mind and absorb the concepts directly. I'm not primarily listening to the words, but in their mind with them, extracting the concepts myself. This circumvents a lot of misunderstanding. I feel these refined children are doing the same. I have taught and made sure my mind is completely open when speaking. There was thought transplanting going on. My bank of info was merged with theirs and they re-schematized, sorry, I don't say that correctly, re-schemized, I still can't say it properly, you know what I'm talking about, their own knowledge systems accordingly. Of course, symbols would be the written conduit for this, like non-literate societies say of ancient Greece, where mystical knowledge could not only be passed on face-to-face by an adept teacher, but ancient symbols hold the conceptual keys that trigger within the observing mind without a teacher being present. And look at the many ways we're being triggered right now, from crop circles right the way through. And this, I hope, is going to tie this in for you.
Can you tell us what you're writing?
Sure. It's really like translating information that has been lost, information that was known by ancient civilizations. I'm not able to give you a more accurate description of this writing. My style is really like a shorthand, if you like. It's probably quite messy. But within each character, again, like the languages, it's really like a block of information in itself. If you were able to get three-dimensional, depiction of each character, because that's how I see each one, that would be much more accurate. With all the information that comes through me, I'm aware of it being multifaceted. When I do healing work, I also will see coding in the air, in the energy field, and I may see this coding in either numbers, like you may see mathematical configurations, or I may see them as dots, or I may actually see them as portals. There are many different ways that you can view them, or you can see them as sound. It's the same with the writing too.
And what are you feeling at the moment that you're doing it? What is the sense that you have?
I feel very happy when I'm expressing in these ways, when I'm expressing through what people might call ET languages or ET writing. It feels much more natural for me than many of the human forms of expression. I guess this has to do with my dual consciousness and the fact that for me it is really learning about being human rather than learning about being extraterrestrial.
It's about learning to be human rather than learning how to be extraterrestrial. Shorthand, like blocks of information, translating lost information that was known by ancient civilizations. And like shorthand, coding in the air and dual consciousness. Very, very fascinating concepts. Donna Redfield, as some of you may know, and as I say, sadly passed away a few years ago, I was in contact with her for a number of years, and she was way ahead of her time in many, many ways. But she gave me some of her drawings where she said were around her contact experiences, how this communication understanding occurred for her. I was writing in codes and frequencies in 1993, long before I heard talk from other experiencers. Many complex drawings to do with script, codes, languages, she believes show gateways or portals, and said at the time I understood it, but couldn't retain conscious understanding. I really tried to leave notes or tracts so I could understand it later, but it didn't work. It's contact communication. I got so much it gets buried. It's like working mid-plane between human language and mathematics, and the higher laws of communication and creation. And it all began with working with letters and numbers. It's like abbreviates of pieces of concepts too large to be comprehended by the uninitiated brain-mind. Absolutely fascinating, and she describes then some of this. This one, in fact, is called Destiny Woman, and again is part of the Kabbalah and relationship to the human body, to the cosmos. Look at the complexity. This is not scribble drawing. These are really profound, and what I have discovered, so I'm going to apologize now that I've been exposing you to a lot of subliminals here, because a lot of this information I'm showing you, I know for many people acts as a kind of trigger. So if you don't want any more triggers, guys, then I think you better walk out the door, because you're going to see some more, because for some people, there's no doubt, it affects them on a deep level. Here's another one that she's done. Notice a lot of the symbols are very, very common. Some are very ancient. And she has had understanding of all of these. Look at the complexity of these and how she understood them. Evolving patterns, she calls this one, beyond reasoning, to do with earth, time, and space. I don't understand them at all, and I'm hoping that at some point I will get someone who will give me some sense of what they're about. I have met a number of individuals I call the translators, and I had a woman contact me from Queensland when she saw a little article about Tracy Taylor in a magazine a couple of years old in a doctor's surgery, and it had Tracy and her drawings, and it had a small piece of script that obviously, you know, had not very much, just a very, very small piece. Why the lady was contacting me was not about her having contact experiences as such at all. She was actually quite frightened. And she said to me, I looked at that script and I could read it. Now you tell me how I can read this. And that's what freaked her out. Well, I think there are people on this planet that have the software to understand it, and I think I'm meeting a few now. Here's another one here. I'll go into that later. This is one of Tracy's very complex drawings. Some of the ones she did only took 10 minutes. But this one was one she did over a number of hours. But she says it really needs to go onto computer to be seen multidimensionally. And I think this is also acting as triggers. So let's take cue. What was interesting with this one, and let me explain what the background of this. Some of the drawings that Tracy did were black and white, done in 10 minutes, and the one you're seeing to the right is one that she did, I think, in 1996. Let me explain a little bit about that. My drawings, Tracy says, depict a grand universal connection in form that can be understood by all intelligent life. The drawings, I believe, come from various extraterrestrial entities, most commonly through beings I would call geometric or crystalline. The artwork comes from my experiences and through an overpowering urge to put pen to paper. Whenever this occurs, my hand is overtaken by an overpowering force with absolutely no input from my conscious mind. But I am not in trance. The communication happens because everything is made up of the same matter, and I mentioned this to you before, of different harmonics. So the ETs are able to communicate with us. These messages I receive are either genetically coded memory power, past life connections, or just by the Great Pyramid sending sonic messages to the already switched on people of the planet who have the vibrational pattern that is encoded, or by the ETs probing us to remember our origins. I think it's all of the three above. One of these images, Tracy had told me, and she mentioned it at the beginning, that she had these ones, she put on transparencies, and when she came to one of my support groups, the experiences plus her were managing to put them together in various ways. And all of them were drawn freehand, and all of them had the direct straight lines with no ruler or whatever, which is amazing in itself. This one, Tracy said, I felt that I had to take it when I went to Egypt. And when she went to Karnak in Luxor, she wanted to find, felt there was going to be a connection from one of the symbols. She said, pyramids are conscious and energetic amplifiers and focusing power source. And then she said, this particular one, I just knew somehow at a distance. I could see and tell they would fit again. I just knew as I had a strong feeling to take it with me. And this is how she describes that image came to her mind. Horus came to me in a dream. I was in an underground cavern or cave. He was showing me some Egyptian hieroglyphs on the wall. This one was carved into the wall with his snake's tongue. And then he grew in size, and I was above the ground looking at the symbol with hills and sunrise in the background. Again, it's a sacred symbol from ancient times to help us awaken and remember who we are. What is absolutely fascinating is how it fits to that hieroglyphic. Again, we're looking at how can we, in some way, corroborate what's going on here. Here's another of her drawings where she describes, again, what the pyramids are about and how she understands it. And again, she has a deeper understanding, but she also says that we need to start accessing our own intuitive understanding with these, because this is where the answers will be. So healing and transformation, where does this come in? Let's find out from Rochelle. Now, Rochelle, I would like to mention to you, is a young lady from Western Australia who I met a long time ago. She was even brave enough to go on to the news program when I did a conference there in 2003, saying she was Star Child and actually could speak a language. And on Channel 7 News, she was shown speaking this language, which is pretty cool that they allowed her to do that. Okay, let's have a look at this now. I want you to hear what she says about the healing, and then I'm going to say, does this relate to what we understand in science? Because all the time, The medical science side of it is part of what I need to know as an ex-nurse and midwife. It's been really important for me to qualify what the experiencer is telling me in as many ways as I can, so that I can understand it, and I can also create a bridge for those of us that have a different language. Let's face it, you know, if you're in computers, it's a language. If you're in science and technology or whatever, there's a different language. So let's see if we can find if it's the same language, just stated in a different way. This is how Rochelle talks about healing.
I've been consciously aware of my extraterrestrial contact now for 8 years, but I've been having contact my whole life. My experiences with extraterrestrials have been quite varied. I have gone through a process now over the past 8 years, and I've come through a lot of the traumatic aspect. And now my experiences have brought me many rewards, particularly in the way of healing abilities, and I myself have changed in a positive way through them. I have a lot of help with healing work. I speak in many different ET languages, and I also write in alien script. These abilities all come quite naturally to me.
How were you aware of the fact that you could heal, and what is your understanding of the healing that you do?
The healing work that I do now has changed and evolved over the years. It first began when I had an experience. I was drawn to go outside of my house at about 3 a.m. and I was looking up at the moon, and when I was looking at the moon I felt quite strange and felt to close my eyes. When I closed my eyes I felt lots of different sensations. I felt cool air being blown on my eyes and on my fingertips. I had pin-pricking sensations all over my face. I had the sensation of wind circling my head, and I could feel it clipping my nose as it went past. I also had sound waves that were going into my ear from a great distance, and these repeated over and over. I had tingling sensations all around my head as well. This process went on for some time, and when it stopped I felt I could open my eyes again, and I felt quite heavy in my body, as if there was someone else in my body. I was then drawn to go inside and lie down on my bed, and when I lay down on my bed I actually started to perform some sort of surgery on myself. I'd never done this before. I'd never had any experience of healing work either done on myself or performing it on others before. So I had my hands away from my body, and the healing involved minute movements of my fingertips. I was using my fingers, or they felt as though they were pulling what you imagine to be puppet strings. That's what it felt like. And I would have a series of consecutive movements, and I could feel the work going right through and penetrating through my organs. I would then hold my fingers sort of locking a position in place, and then I would use a series of very specific movements of the muscles in my eyes, which would then unlock or release this pressure. I had to actually move my body into different positions to access all the parts of my body. As the years went by, the healing work that I was doing actually changed, so I was using my whole hand instead of just my fingers. I wasn't actually using my eyes as much consciously, and then later on I started using toning. I was intuitively guided to use toning, and then later language came through. After the languages came through, then I started using a combination of toning and language, and songs came through. I can best explain these as being songs that are used for the soul to recognize. Souls may remember these songs from other planets, other lifetimes, and they help the individual to feel comfortable for the particular healing work to take place. Really they're used as you might use a lullaby to help a baby go to sleep. It helps them to relax. Or a chant is used to switch off the mind and help one to go into an altered state.
I'm going to tie that into it for you. For some of you that may appear extremely unusual and extremely strange, and I do understand that. But let's look at it again, and I'm going to show you a little bit more of that, because Rochelle is actually going to explain how she understands what's going on, because that's one thing to see that expression and not understand it. So let's see if we can find out more of what exactly is going on as she understands it. But what she's saying here is, I work to retune, like I use a tuning fork, like you would a musical instrument. I do this by bringing in the frequencies the person most needs at the time, both sound and colored symbols, as we are multidimensional in nature. Edgar Cayce talked about sound as being, light and sound as being the healing of the future. What we're hearing there is a frequency, and we're hearing sound. Let's just go on a little bit more with that. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. How can we move that? Let me see. No. Where do I go, guys? Come on, someone. Just I press it again, do I? No. Oh, it's all right. I think I've got it. I think.
I work as a healer. I switch from how I normally operate as my human self to my ET self. It might sound a bit strange, but I have been given information about my dual consciousness. I can best describe this as coming into this vehicle having both ET and human characteristics. My human self is very sensitive, very emotional. My ET self is very clinical, very practical, very matter-of-fact. The healing work that I do, I'm operating in ET. It is really like operating as a surgeon. I see very clearly in the energy field the problem, and I fix it. There's no room for emotional involvement. My personality steps aside, and I hear where the energy field is out of tune. I don't hear in the way that we normally hear. I hear with another sense, if you like, that we don't normally use. There'll be certain places in the energy field that will be out of tune, and I work to retune, almost like you would use a tuning fork to hear when a musical note is in tune. How I do this is by bringing in the frequencies that the person most needs at the time. I do this through sound and colour, and quite often symbols come through with the sounds that I translate as well. The symbols are multidimensional in nature. They're not like normal shapes that we are used to. I work with a team usually of about 6 to 10 different beings that help me, and my team actually changes as I do. Usually I don't like to name the beings that I work with or identify them. I think for me it's just important that I'm aware of their energy more than anything else. But they will give me a name if it helps me to feel comfortable and more familiar with them. The client usually will feel relaxed after a session. Usually they will feel more balanced. quite often they will leave their body, or I will, I guess, be aware that they leave their body during the session. They may be aware that they've fallen asleep, but it's actually quite different, and they usually leave at exactly the same time during the session. It's usually about half an hour into the session that they leave. This is so deeper work can take place without their conscious mind being involved.
Well, given it on its own, and for many of you not exposed to energy work or healing of that kind, that may seem extremely strange. I've been exposed to so much of it now, I've sort of got kind of blasé, so I forget, but that can be quite challenging for a lot of people. But I want to now take it back to something maybe you can relate to, so you can perhaps bridge the gap between what you've just seen until when I'll get Rochelle to explain what she understood from that healing session. Recent Russian DNA discoveries, summarized by Barbel and publication in Germany, of the work of von Graesner-Fozar and Franz Bludhoff, suggest that our DNA can be influenced and reprogrammed by words and frequencies without cutting out or replacing single genes. And the geneticists and linguists have found that DNA is not only responsible for the construction of our bodies, but serves as a data storage, and in communication follows the same rules as language. It just requires the right frequencies. And of course, this explains some of the power of hypnosis, as well as the sounds and languages from experiences with healing. So what if, could you make the jump, that if we're now being shown through science that language, if it's the right language, can actually alter our DNA or heal or change our DNA, what are we hearing here from the experiencer? Sound, frequency, language. It's sort of like, for me, it's the same language, just a different way of expressing it. Now let's hear what Rochelle has to say about what she's just done. Oh, sorry.
Very relaxed, very at ease. Like a lot of things have been taken off my shoulders.
The beings that were working with me were wanting to demonstrate how the different areas in the body actually interact. So when I was placing my hands across and pointing out different sections of the body, this was for the audience as well as for you. It was just showing how each part of the body is not independent of any other area. They all work together, and it's important that we recognise this, see the body as a whole. There are particular titles that are given to each part of the body that are related with vibrations, and by expressing the title or the name, as you would say, it actually activates that area. They also have links with different energies from planets and dimensions. So if you like, we're imagining that the body is the universe and all the planets from our solar system and all others exist within this. So we are making them all work together. And within each chakra, all of the planets exist. So we are just activating the appropriate planets for this particular vessel at this time. Others will be activated at other times, but they all exist within each chakra. And each chakra is also multidimensional in nature. It is not, as we imagine, just 7 chakras, but each has many layers.
So we're multidimensional. And when we hear it like that, it actually does make a lot of sense, at least to me. We've got to understand that we are multidimensional in nature. And interestingly, what both Fozar and Bludhoff are saying is this: the vibrational nature of DNA is like a holographic computer. Information can be transmitted by vibration and frequency they call wave genetics. And they've also found DNA can cause disturbing patterns in a vacuum, producing magnetized wormholes. These are tunnel connections between entirely different areas of the universe through which information is transmitted through time and space. The DNA attracts this information and passes it on to our consciousness. Hypercommunication, and that in a state of relaxation. So when we start seeing ourselves as multidimensional beings, a lot of this information actually starts to make sense. And this is what I would like to demonstrate. But okay, so what's going on with other triggers of consciousness that we are getting on this planet now as a part of waking us up to who and what we are? Crop circles. Barbara Lamb will be talking very eloquently, I know, on this in her wonderful research and knowledge. So all I will say is that this is how I am seeing the communication happening on a number of levels of our multidimensional nature. Again, Freddie Silver's saying, could it be by implication that crop circles are a universal language, which of course I believe they are. Now, as we get to the final part of my presentation, I'm talking about certain levels of education and changes that are being orchestrated by these advanced intelligences. My understanding so far, limited as it is suggesting this. It's suggesting that our DNA is certainly being altered and changed through our interaction with these intelligences. That is the reason for the medical procedures, the collecting of certain specimens, such as over a sperm. All of that is part of the body being upgraded and and our connection to these species. My information is that some of us are hybrids, certainly, of maybe one or two other intelligences, which may be a little bit unnerving for some of you, and it certainly is to my clients when they discover it. For example, a mix of human, grey, and manta being, for example. So what we're seeing is a genetic mix for certain purposes, for certain programs of, for this planet. And certain, if you like, people have got certain roles who will need certain abilities. And this is which ties into the ADD, the ADHD, the autistic, I suspect, and also Asperger's, because all of them have had encounters with those so-called conditions. What if, as Neil Gold, some of you may know from Hong Kong, has written his story, Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind. What is interesting about the ADHD child is their lack of concentration, not easy to socialize or whatever. What if, and this is just a what if, we've got new programs on this planet where it's harder to program them, which allows them then to experience a greater reality. What if these children are so configured that they actually are used to having information at a speed that we can't even conceive? And so our way of teaching them is so boring they just want to go somewhere else, la la. What if the autistic child has certain abilities we've not yet ascertained in terms of their multidimensional abilities, their intuitive abilities? Parents struggle so much to relate and communicate. What if that is because they are accessing other realms that we are not? But the amazing thing is that most parents will tell you the one thing that these children actually relate to is unconditional love. What if we're being taught what's important here with these children at the end of the day is the one thing we can reach them is what we've got to learn? What if with the Asperger's, I mention that because a gentleman came to me, he said, I'm Asperger's, they say we can't socialize with people. He said, it's absolute rubbish. So I said, what do you mean? He said, between ourselves, we have no trouble communicating. We have no trouble socializing. But he says, you know, with other humans, he said, you put up all these masks. You lie to each other all the time. You're never honest. I can't be bothered with that. Other aspects can't be bothered with that. We know you're lying. We can sense it. So we don't bother. So what if some of these new programs are moving us away from a limited third-dimensional reality and programming so we can more able access that multidimensional nature that we all have the ability to access. I don't know. It's just what ifs, because all of those conditions are now rising at an incredible rate. And I'm not sure it's all due to vaccinations, or it may be, but not maybe completely, I don't know. But I'm just offering you perhaps an idea of maybe these advanced intelligences are working on multi-layers of programs to help this planet evolve. And we may see them as dysfunctions because we don't know exactly where they're operating from. And now I'm going to take it to another level. As you know, some of you now that were here this morning, Suzanne Hansen of Focus NZ is an amazing researcher and a great resource in New Zealand, but she's also become a really dear friend of mine who I met here at the UFO Congress, believe it or not, in 1999. We became instant friends. But Suzanne, for many years, was very careful to keep her conscious memories rather than have any regression because of the consensus generally that anything in hypnosis was, in fact, less valid, even though Dr. John Mack, who all of you know, sadly gone now to the other realms, where I'm sure he's very happy exploring those other realms. But what he did say, which profoundly affected me as someone who works in hypnosis so much, he believed that hypnosis and the information we got from our subconscious mind was far more valid than conscious memory. And the reason for that is we actually speak our truth from our subconscious, whereas our conscious mind actually edits out what is not comfortable. And yet our subconscious, he says, does not edit that out. Therefore, what we're hearing is the complete picture. So it's really turning things on its head, and I subscribe to that. But with Suzanne, what we found was that at some point she was guided to and came to me and said, "Now, Mary, it's time for me to find out more." And these two instances that she's going to describe now were not ones that she had consciously chosen to explore. She didn't even know about them. We had gone through some of the experiences she did want to explore, but these were open mandate. In other words, we trusted that whatever she was going to explore was going to be important or valid in terms of her own journey with this. And it's taking us to a completely different perspective.
My name is Suzanne Hansen and I'm the Director of a New Zealand UFO Sighting and Contact Research Network called Focus NZ. I have experienced contact with extraterrestrial species since early childhood. Today I will describe two directly related experiences on board craft which demonstrate how some souls are altered, educated and fostered by ET species as a part of ongoing constructive programs and agendas for the future benefit of mankind. In 1962, when I was 8 years old, I was taken on board a craft and into a large familiar room that I had visited often with other human children. Here we learned to interact and socialise comfortably and competently with other species of ET children, using enhanced telepathy and sentiency. On this occasion, I was taken aside by an adult grey and asked if I'd like to meet another child somewhere on board the craft. The grey telepathically conveyed thoughts, pictures and explanations to me regarding this child and its life. But the volume of information was too great to retain consciously, and I was just left with an overall impression regarding meeting a new friend. The grey told me about the child with considerable care, and I sensed there was something he was not yet telling me, but he was seeking my cooperation with this meeting. We proceeded to a small room and waited, and I felt excited about meeting a new friend. Two greys entered the room with a vibrant blue ball of light floating in the air between them. As I stared at the ball in surprise, having expected a child to arrive, I experienced profound feelings of love and familiarity and sobbed at these unexpected thoughts. The grey told me I would love this ball of light in the future, as it would become my son. He referred to it as both a source and a complex system, and said I had known it since before my own birth. The the grey began an intense mind-to-mind download consisting of 3 streams of information. The first just calmed my emotions and confusion. They wanted us to get to know each other, future mother and son, and they would observe how we related to each other. A second stream embedded extensive information into my subconscious concerning the purpose of this project, the genetics involved in the creation of my son's body, and the dual education he would receive on board craft, both as a child and in his source or soul state, which he told me had been enhanced and altered by them for a specific purpose. Finally, a third stream brought my mind back to the present as an 8-year-old child, and they left me to play with the ball for a while. I tried to relate to the ball by first asking it to bounce, but it just floated there, unresponsive. I felt disappointed and sat down on the floor. Suddenly, I felt as if I was being watched and became aware the ball was thinking at me. It descended down onto my shoulder, and we were soon racing around the room, communicating happily. But, all too soon, the Greys returned. They expressed satisfaction that the meeting had gone well. 2 of them took the ball of light away, and I felt deep sadness and longing. The Grey assured me that we would meet again many times up until the day that this son would be born. So we returned to where the other children were interacting. In 1983, now aged 28 years old and near to full term in my first pregnancy, I was taken on board craft. My memory begins with me being assisted down a corridor by 2 tall entities, a mixture of species. They expressed concern for me as I had been ill throughout the pregnancy, and so they tenderly supported me as we entered a small room. They helped me onto a shelf-like bed, and we were joined by a Grey. He explained that they were bringing someone to merge with me, and I was not to be concerned as everything would be fine. Holding his hand over my forehead, he told me he first needed to retrieve some memories from my subconscious mind, which had been embedded there in childhood. Immediately, my mind was filled with images, emotions, and memories of past meetings associated with a ball of blue light, and I became really tearful as I realized it was the soul of my child soon to be born. As he calmed my emotions, a group of ET children came into the room, bringing with them the now familiar soul or ball of energy. He stated these young entities had grown up on board craft with this soul, and they would play an integral part in supporting him in his life. There was a real air of excitement as the process of merging began. The Grey slowed my metabolism right down to prepare my body for the intense energy of the soul, necessary to prevent shock to my body. During the hypnotic regression with Mary, my voice became really slow and almost indistinguishable at this point, and my body felt cold and numb. Slowly the soul entered my body and the body of my child-to-be. I felt infused with light and weightlessness as the Grey slowly brought my metabolism back to normal again. He stated my son would be born late, which he was, and that he would be accompanied through his life by watchers, a terminology to describe a protective system they would provide for him. He added there are thousands of children being born in a world like him, part of an extensive project to create positive changes and accelerated evolution from within the human species. These 2 experiences illustrate the complexity of the soul state and reveal extraterrestrial involvement with souls incarnating on this planet for specific purposes. It challenges us to reassess our current understanding of the soul's existence before incarnation, and the idea that the soul evolves not just through repeated cycles and lifetimes of personal experiences, but can also be enhanced, altered, and educated by external forces or species.
So, these extraterrestrial advanced intelligences, I believe interdimensional, transcendental. Is there a separation, or is it in fact levels of awareness and consciousness all working together from source. Just as Dolores Cannon was talking about, and also talking about how these new children coming in, if the mother isn't of the right frequency, then she ends up with a miscarriage, which she mentioned the other day. And when I was taking Susie into that regression, her voice went really like this. It was a completely different frequency. She was actually re-experiencing it from that. And because of that, we've had to condense it so that you could get a sense of the fact that here is a little 8-year-old child being first introduced to her son, yet unborn. And to give you a little bit more of an idea, which broadens this a little bit more, when I was in England a few years ago, I regressed a 15-year-old boy who had had a very traumatic experience. And the two things that stood out from that experience was this. First of all, when he was having an experience with the little beings, and he was quite happy to chat to them, he said, oh, he was saying, there's 2 balls of light. One's Granddad, and that's Uncle Ted. He recognized the balls of light and who they were. And he said, and I said, well, why are they there? And he said, because they knew I'd be a bit frightened, so they wanted to come and just give me some support. It just made me feel better. And then I said, what happens next? And he said, oh, the beings are going back onto the spaceship. And he said, oh, he said, Uncle Ted and Granddad's going with them. So the balls of light were going back on the craft. I've had many instances where it seems that we're not just looking at the physical body that is being communicated or worked with, but all those other levels, the emotional, astral, and spiritual body. We're talking about really the fact we can't separate this out, that all of this is tied in, as Dolores Cannon mentions, coming from the source. And that, I think, is really, really important to remember when we don't fully always understand what's going on, that we're still only seeing it through a pinhole of understanding. And the more that you access that part of yourself, the more chance you have. I would like to just say 2 more things before I go and finish with you. Something that I missed part of is because the medical science of me is saying, okay, Mary, so where's the tangibility of this? Is there a way that we can understand how this shift that we're hearing and the changes that are happening, where does this all fit in? How is it going to happen to the rest of us, the old models, as I call them, like myself? Okay, is there any chance in here for me? Right, from an old model to some old models over there and around, I will say this. We use, what is it, 1/5 of our brain? We use 3% of our DNA. Recently, I discovered some really interesting information which I want to share with you. So, why is that? Why do we only use a part of ourselves physically? It doesn't make any sense, you know? We all know that we have 223 genomes in our DNA that are not part, that did not come through the evolutionary cycle, that are a sideways insertion of genetic material, all to do with higher psychological functioning. Who put that there? But let's go into this now. The little code and the big code. So 3% we're using, 97% junk DNA. They're now looking at it differently. They're talking about a little code and a big code. Okay, let's look at it from this perspective. What some of the scientists are saying now, and one of them is a Dr. Chung, is saying this. What we see in our DNA is a program consisting of 2 versions of a big code and a basic code. The complete program was positively not written on Earth. That is now a verified fact, according to Dr. Chang. The genes by themselves are not enough to explain evolution. No creator, be it a programmer from Mars, Microsoft, would not leave a program without the option for an improvement or upgrade. The upgrade is already enclosed in our junk DNA. It is nothing more than a hidden, dormant upgrade of our present basic code. We already know that certain cosmic rays have the power to modify DNA. So it's plausible the extraterrestrial programmers may just use one flash of the right energy from somewhere in the universe to instruct the basic code to remove its blocks and fuse itself with the big code. That would change us forever. Some of us within months, no more cancers, diseases, short life, and catapult us intellectually. The comparison would be the difference between Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons to Homo sapiens sapiens. This complete program is elegant, self-organizing, auto-correcting software for a highly advanced biological computer. The difference between a short diseased life and potential for a super intelligent, super being with a long and healthy life. So, okay, wow. So there's possibilities there, isn't there? So what about the downloads? We're getting these scripts, languages. We're getting given this symbolic and an energetic information through COP circles and what have you. And they're saying a flash of the right energy. So the triggers, we're already getting them. So at the end of the day, if this is possible, maybe what we're really seeing is we are operating from a very poor part of our hard drive right now. When our hard drive gets switched on, we are now capable of taking new software. What if what these downloads are that we can't understand, which in fact Rochelle was saying, one script contains enough information for a room full of encyclopedias. What if we are already being given the software for the new hard drive, which is waiting for us all? And if that is the case, the star children, the third wave, the sleepers, as Tracy would say, they are the bringers of the new, the bringers of light, to guide the awakening of terrestrial consciousness. And this is what we're all becoming, perhaps. Thank you for your time, love and energy.
Mary Rodwell, indeed. Wow. Okay, gonna do lunchtime.